TIFU family thought I was weak, so I got power of attorney and destroyed them. TIFU by underestimating the weak grandchild. Well, well. Look who finally crawled out of their little spreadsheet cave. Uncle Marcus's voice dripped with that familiar condescension as I walked through the front door of Grandma Rose's Victorian mansion. The same tone he'd used since I was 12, like I was some pathetic charity case who'd stumbled into the wrong tax bracket. Marcus. I nodded, setting my overnight bag down in the marble foyer. How's Grandma doing? Like you actually care, Aunt Helen chimed in from the sitting room, not bothering to look up from whatever document she was shoving in front of my grandmother. You haven't visited in what, 8 months? But suddenly she gets a little chest cold and here you come running. A little chest cold. Grandma Rose had pneumonia and had been in the ICU for 3 days. I'd driven 12 hours straight from Chicago the moment I heard, but apparently that wasn't fast enough for the family vultures who'd somehow materialized within hours of her hospital admission. Where is she? I asked, ignoring Helen's barb. Resting upstairs, Uncle James said, emerging from the kitchen with that smug smile I'd grown to hate. Doctor says she needs to avoid stress. Maybe you should come back when she's feeling stronger. Right. Because nothing said, avoiding stress, like having 3 grown adults hovering over a sick 82-year-old with legal papers. I could see them scattered across the coffee table from here, something with transfer of assets in bold letters across the top. I think I'll say hello anyway, I said, heading for the stairs. Always were stubborn, Marcus muttered. Just like your father. Look how well that worked out for him. My jaw clenched, but I kept walking. Dad had been the black sheep too, the one who'd chosen teaching over the family real estate business. The one they'd written off as weak and idealistic. Right up until his sudden death 5 years ago, they treated him like he was an embarrassment to the family name. I knocked softly on Grandma's bedroom door. Grandma Rose? It's me. Oh, sweetheart. Her voice was hoarse but genuinely delighted. Come in, come in. I was hoping you'd make it. She looked smaller than I remembered, propped up against her pillows with an oxygen cannula under her nose. But her eyes were still sharp, still calculating. Still the woman who'd built a multi-million-dollar property empire from a single boarding house she bought with her late husband's life insurance money. How are you feeling? I asked, settling into the chair beside her bed. Like hell, if I'm being honest. She patted my hand with surprising strength. But better now that you're here. I suppose you saw the reception committee downstairs. Hard to miss. What's all that paperwork about? Grandma Rose's expression darkened. They think I'm losing my marbles. Keep insisting I need to simplify my affairs while I'm still coherent enough to sign documents. She snorted. 60 years I've been managing my own business, and suddenly I'm too frail to handle a checkbook. Through the bedroom door, I could hear muffled voices downstairs. Uncle Marcus was saying something about getting everything sorted before she gets confused again, and Aunt Helen was laughing about how I'd probably cry and run back to my calculator job once I realized how serious things were. The same dismissive laughter I'd heard my entire life. Poor little mouse, too soft for the real world. Grandma Rose must have heard it too, because her grip on my hand tightened. There's something we need to discuss, she said quietly. Something they don't know about yet. She reached into her nightstand drawer with trembling fingers, pulling out a manila envelope that looked like it had been handled frequently. My name was written across the front in her distinctive handwriting. I had my attorney draw this up 6 months ago, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Right after that disaster at James's birthday party. I remembered that night. Uncle James had gotten drunk and spent 20 minutes loudly explaining to anyone who'd listen why I'd never be successful like the real members of the family. How accounting was just playing with other people's money, and how I'd probably end up broke and begging for handouts. Aunt Helen had cackled and added that at least I might make some rich man a decent housewife someday, since I was too mousy to make it in business. Grandma Rose had gone very quiet that night. I thought she was just tired. What is it? I asked, though something in my chest was already tightening with anticipation. Power of attorney. Complete financial and medical authority. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the fierce woman who'd intimidated business partners twice her size. They think you're weak, sweetheart. They always have. But you know what I see when I look at you? Before I could answer, heavy footsteps echoed up the stairs. Marcus's voice boomed through the hallway. Mom. We really need to get these documents signed while the notary is here. Helen called him special, and he's charging overtime for the house call. I see your father, Grandma Rose continued urgently, pressing the envelope into my hands. Same principles, same backbone, but with something he never had, the ruthlessness to actually use it when necessary. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. The original is already filed with my attorney, she whispered. Has been for months. They have no idea. My hands shook as I processed what she was telling me. Complete control over her assets, the real estate portfolio, the investment accounts, the business holdings. Everything. My aunts and uncles were downstairs dividing up like hyenas over a carcass. Grandma Rose, are you sure about this? I mean, they're going to. They're going to what? Treat you badly. Mock you. Dismiss everything you say. Her laugh was dry and bitter. They already do that, honey. The difference is now you'll have the power to do something about it. The door handle turned. Mom, I'm coming in, Marcus announced, shouldering through the door with his usual lack of consideration. Helen and James crowded in behind him, Helen clutching a stack of papers and James carrying a laptop. Oh good, the whole gang's here, Grandma Rose said sweetly, sliding the envelope under her blanket. How thoughtful of you all to be so concerned about my well-being. We brought the paperwork, Helen said, shooting me an irritated look. The notary's downstairs, and we really should handle this while you're feeling clear-headed. Handle what exactly? I asked. Marcus rolled his eyes. Adult business. Maybe you should go make some coffee or something. James smirked. Yeah, let the grown-ups take care of things. This is a bit more complicated than balancing someone's personal checking account. Under the blanket, I felt the envelope's sharp edges pressing against my palm. 6 months ago, she'd said. Before any of this crisis started. When she was completely healthy and thinking clearly. You know what? I stood up slowly, looking at each of their condescending faces. I think I'll stay. This sounds fascinating. Helen's expression suggested she'd rather swallow glass. Really, this doesn't concern you. If only they knew. Actually, it does concern me, I said, settling back into my chair with a confidence that made Marcus's eyebrows raise. I'm family too, last I checked. Family that shows up twice a year, James muttered, opening his laptop. Look, we appreciate you coming, but this is serious business stuff. Mom needs to consolidate her holdings into a trust before. Before what? Grandma Rose's voice cut through the room like ice. Before I die. Before I lose my mind. Which disaster are you preparing for exactly, James? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I watched my uncles and aunt exchange glances, their carefully rehearsed presentation suddenly derailed. Mom, that's not what we meant, Helen said, her tone shifting to saccharine sweetness. We just want to make sure everything is organized. You know how complicated your portfolio has gotten. All those properties, the investment accounts, the business partnerships. It would be so much simpler if everything was managed by people who understand real estate, Marcus added. People with experience in the family business. I almost laughed. The family business that none of them had actually built. Marcus worked as a middle manager at a firm that mostly handled suburban developments. James flipped houses, badly, from what I'd heard. Helen had married into money and spent her time on charity boards, which somehow qualified her as a business expert in her own mind. And what happens to Grandma Rose in this scenario? I asked. Does she get an allowance from her own money? Of course not, James said quickly. She'd have full access to everything. We'd just be handling the day-to-day management. Like you handled your own finances. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Didn't you file for bankruptcy 3 years ago, James? His face went red. That was a temporary setback. The market. And Marcus, how's that investment property in Florida working out? The one that's been sitting empty for 18 months because you bought it sight unseen. Marcus's jaw tightened. How do you know about that? I'm an accountant. I pay attention to these things. I stood up again, and suddenly I felt like I was channeling every ounce of Grandma Rose's business instincts. Unlike you three, I actually understand what financial responsibility looks like. Oh, please, Helen scoffed. You balance books for other people. That's not the same as managing real assets, real investments. You wouldn't last 5 minutes making actual business decisions. Wouldn't I? I pulled the envelope from under Grandma Rose's blanket, my heart hammering but my voice steady. Maybe we should test that theory. The room went dead quiet. Marcus was the first to notice the legal letterhead visible through the envelope's transparent window. What is that? He asked slowly. Something I've been meaning to discuss with all of you, Grandma Rose said, her voice stronger now. I had my attorney prepare some documents a few months ago. Just to make sure my affairs were in proper order. Helen's eyes narrowed. What kind of documents? I opened the envelope, savoring the moment despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The power of attorney form was thick, official, and very clearly labeled. My name appeared in multiple places, along with language granting me complete authority over all financial and medical decisions. The kind that make this conversation very interesting, I said, holding up the papers. James leaned forward, squinting at the document. Is that power of attorney? I confirmed. Comprehensive. Filed with the probate court 6 months ago. The silence stretched so long I could hear the grandfather clock ticking downstairs. Marcus was the first to explode. 6 months ago. Mom, you were completely healthy 6 months ago. Why would you? Because I'm not stupid, Marcus, Grandma Rose snapped. I saw exactly what you three were planning. The way you started hovering whenever I mentioned feeling tired. The sudden interest in my legacy planning. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Helen's face had gone pale. Mom, surely you don't mean to give everything to the one grandchild who never asked me for money. Who never tried to manipulate me. Who actually built a career instead of waiting for handouts. James was frantically typing on his laptop. This can't be legal. She wasn't of sound mind. We can contest this. I smiled, finally understanding why Grandma Rose had waited for them all to be here. Feel free to try, I said. But you might want to check the date on your precious paperwork first. James's typing grew more frantic as he pulled up whatever legal documents he'd prepared. The clicking of keys filled the increasingly tense silence. July 15th, he muttered, reading from his screen. All our paperwork is dated July 15th, when Mom was admitted to the hospital. How convenient, I said, letting them do the math themselves. Marcus snatched the power of attorney from my hands, his eyes scanning desperately for some loophole. January 18th, he read aloud, his voice hollow. 6 months ago. Which means, Grandma Rose said with obvious satisfaction, that any documents requiring my signature after that date would need approval from my designated agent. She gestured toward me. That would be my granddaughter. Helen's composure finally cracked completely. This is insane. You can't possibly think she's qualified to manage your estate. She's never handled anything bigger than a small business audit. And yet she's the only one who never tried to convince me I was losing my mind, Grandma Rose replied coolly. Funny how that works. Mom, be reasonable, Marcus pleaded, his condescending tone replaced by barely controlled panic. This is a multi-million-dollar portfolio. Real estate holdings across 3 states. Investment accounts. Business partnerships that need active management. She doesn't have the experience. The experience to what? I interrupted, my confidence growing with each desperate word. To not bankrupt myself buying swampland in Florida. To avoid filing for Chapter 11. To resist spending money I don't have on charity galas and country club memberships. James slammed his laptop shut. You smug little. Careful, I warned, holding up the power of attorney. I'd hate for Grandma Rose to get upset and need medical attention. As her designated agent, I'd have to make some very important decisions about her care. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Helen's face went white as she realized the full implications. You wouldn't, she whispered. I wouldn't what? Take care of my grandmother. Make decisions based on her best interests instead of what's convenient for people trying to steal from her. I shook my head. You're right. I absolutely wouldn't do that. We're not trying to steal anything. Marcus exploded. We're family. We're trying to protect her assets. From who? Grandma Rose asked sharply. The only threat to my assets is standing in this room, and it isn't coming from the granddaughter who drove 12 hours to check on me. I watched my uncles and aunt exchange increasingly desperate glances. Their entire plan was crumbling, and they were finally realizing just how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. There has to be something we can do, Helen muttered to Marcus. Some way to challenge this. Good luck, I said. Grandma Rose had a complete cognitive evaluation done when she filed these papers. Clean bill of health. Her attorney is very thorough about these things. James's face was turning an alarming shade of purple. You planned this. Both of you. This whole sick act, bringing us all here. I have pneumonia, you idiot, Grandma Rose snapped. I'm genuinely ill. The only performance here was you three pretending to be concerned family members instead of the vultures you actually are. So what happens now? Marcus asked, his voice deflated. You're just going to let her control everything. I'm going to let the person I trust control everything, Grandma Rose corrected. The person who proved she values family over money. I looked at my defeated relatives, feeling a mixture of triumph and something else, something darker. They'd spent decades making me feel small, dismissing my accomplishments, treating me like I didn't belong. Now they were about to learn what real power looked like. What happens now, I said slowly, is that we have a very honest conversation about how things are going to change around here. The silence that followed my words was deafening. I could practically hear the gears grinding in their heads as they tried to process this new reality where the weak grandchild held all the cards. Uncle Marcus was the first to attempt damage control, his voice taking on that sickeningly familiar patronizing tone. Now, sweetheart, I know we've had our differences over the years, but we're still family. Surely we can work something out that benefits everyone. Benefits everyone? I repeated, savoring the desperation creeping into his voice. You mean like how you worked something out when you convinced Grandma Rose to co-sign that loan for your Jacksonville property? The one you defaulted on, leaving her holding a $200,000 debt. His face went ashen. How did you? Or maybe like how you worked something out, Helen, when you borrowed against her stock portfolio to fund your daughter's wedding. The stocks that are still underwater because you insisted on cashing them out at the worst possible time. Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That was a temporary arrangement. I was going to pay it back. With what money? Your charity board salary. I turned to James, who was backing toward the door. And let's not forget your brilliant working something out when you used her credit to secure materials for that house flip in Tampa. The one where you discovered asbestos 3 months into renovations. You don't understand the complexities, James started. I understand that between the three of you, you've cost Grandma Rose over $500,000 in the past 2 years alone, I cut him off. I understand that you've been systematically bleeding her dry while treating her like she's senile. Grandma Rose was watching this exchange with obvious satisfaction, but I caught something else in her expression, a calculation that made me wonder just how much she planned this moment. The thing is, I continued, my confidence growing with each revelation, I've been keeping track. Every loan, every emergency you needed help with, every time you guilt her into bailing you out of your own mistakes. Did you really think she wasn't telling me about these things? Marcus's composure finally cracked. She had no right to discuss private family financial matters with an outsider. An outsider? The words hit like a slap. I'm her granddaughter, Marcus. But more than that, I'm the only person in this room who never asked her for a single dollar. That's not entirely true, Helen said suddenly, her voice sharp with desperate cunning. What about college? What about your car when you graduated? She paid for plenty of your expenses over the years. I felt a flicker of uncertainty. She wasn't wrong, Grandma Rose had helped me through school, had given me graduation gifts like she had all the grandchildren. Was I being hypocritical? But Grandma Rose's voice cut through my doubt. The difference, Helen, is that she never asked. I offered because she earned it. She worked 2 jobs through college while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. She sent me thank you notes for birthday gifts and called just to check on me, not because she needed something. Plus, I added, my resolve strengthening, I actually used the education she helped pay for. I didn't blow it on get-rich-quick schemes and bad investments. James suddenly straightened, and I caught a flash of something calculating in his expression. You know what? This is all very touching, but there's one thing you're forgetting, little cousin. The way he said little cousin made my skin crawl, but I kept my expression neutral. What's that, James? Grandma Rose might trust you with her finances, but managing this kind of wealth? The property management companies, the commercial leases, the investment advisors, they're not going to take orders from some small-town accountant. They know us. They've worked with our family for years. Helen perked up, sensing an opening. James is right. The Sanderson Group handles most of Mom's commercial properties. David Sanderson and Marcus play golf together every weekend. You think he's going to listen to someone he's never met? Marcus nodded eagerly. And Helen's been the primary contact with the investment firm for the past 5 years. They won't even recognize your name. I felt my stomach drop slightly. They weren't wrong, I'd been so focused on the legal authority that I hadn't fully considered the practical challenges of actually exercising that power. These business relationships had been built over decades, and I was essentially an unknown quantity. Besides, James continued, his confidence returning, power of attorney or not, you're going to need us. You can't manage a portfolio this complex from Chicago. You have your own job, your own life. How are you going to handle property inspections in Miami while sitting in some accounting office in Illinois? They were backing me into a corner, and we all knew it. Having legal authority was one thing, but the day-to-day reality of managing Grandma Rose's empire was something else entirely. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, his voice taking on that familiar smugness. We'll continue managing everything like we always have. You can review the books, ask questions, whatever makes you feel important. But the actual work needs to be done by people who know what they're doing. My hands clenched into fists. Even faced with complete legal defeat, they were still trying to manipulate me, still treating me like the helpless little girl who needed their guidance. That's when Grandma Rose started laughing. It wasn't a pleasant laugh. It was the sound a predator makes when its prey walks directly into a trap. Oh, Marcus, Grandma Rose said, wiping tears from her eyes. You really think you're the only one who's been planning ahead? The smug confidence drained from his face. What do you mean? Did you honestly believe I'd give my granddaughter authority over my estate without making sure she could actually exercise it? She reached for her phone on the nightstand. Honey, would you mind calling David Sanderson for me? I believe his direct number is still in my contacts. My hands shook as I took the phone, but I managed to find the number. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. Rose. How are you feeling? I heard you gave everyone quite a scare. Much better, David, thank you. I'm here with my family, and I wanted to introduce you to someone. She gestured for me to take the phone. Mr. Sanderson. This is Rose's granddaughter. I believe we'll be working together going forward. There was a pause, then a warm chuckle. Ah, the accountant from Chicago. Rose has told me so much about you. I've been looking forward to this conversation. The blood drained from Marcus's face as he realized what was happening. She's briefed you on the transition? I asked, my confidence returning. Extensively. We had a long meeting in January about restructuring the management agreements. Your grandmother speaks very highly of your analytical skills. She thinks you'll bring some much-needed oversight to the portfolio. January. The same month she'd filed the power of attorney. I'm looking forward to reviewing the current performance metrics, I said, watching Marcus's expression grow increasingly desperate. As am I. Some of the properties have been underperforming lately. Your grandmother suggested a full audit might be in order. Helen was frantically whispering something to James, but I couldn't make out the words over the ringing in my ears. This wasn't just about legal authority. Grandma Rose had spent months preparing for this transition. We'll schedule something soon, I told David. Thank you for your time. After I hung up, the room fell silent except for the sound of James's increasingly frantic typing on his laptop. The investment firm, Helen said suddenly, her voice pitched high with desperation. Meridian Financial. They won't. Already handled, Grandma Rose said calmly. I updated my beneficiary designations and contact information last month. My granddaughter is now the primary account manager. James's laptop screen was reflecting off his glasses, and I could see he was frantically scrolling through what looked like financial statements. The Miami properties, he said suddenly. The ones I've been overseeing. You can't possibly manage them remotely. The maintenance contracts alone are being transferred to a new property management company next month, I said, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. Aren't they, Grandma Rose? Her smile was sharp as a blade. I was getting tired of the missed inspections and inflated invoices. Amazing how maintenance costs triple when the property owner isn't paying close attention. Marcus was staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before. You've been planning this for months. Every conversation, every family dinner where you seemed confused about the business. I was gathering information, she said simply. Seeing how far you'd push things when you thought I wasn't sharp enough to notice. Helen's face had gone completely white. The loan documents we prepared. The trust paperwork. You knew we were planning. I knew exactly what you were planning, Grandma Rose cut her off. Just like I know about the second mortgage James took out against the Tampa property without telling me. And the kickbacks Marcus has been receiving from the Jacksonville contractors. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my uncle's face cycle through denial, anger, and finally resignation as he realized the extent of what his mother knew. So what now? He asked, his voice hollow. You've cut us out completely. Congratulations. I hope you're both very happy together. Oh, we're not done yet, I said, surprised even myself with the steel in my voice. We haven't even gotten to the interesting part. Something in my tone made all three of them look up sharply. See, I've been doing some math, I continued, and I think it's time we discussed repayment plans. The word repayment hung in the air like a death sentence. I watched the color drain from Marcus's face as the implications sank in. Repayment? Helen's voice cracked. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, opening the spreadsheet I'd been working on during the drive from Chicago. 12 hours on the road had given me plenty of time to organize my thoughts, and Grandma Rose's financial records that she'd been quietly sending me for months. Let's start with you, Marcus. The Jacksonville property loan, $200,000 that Grandma Rose co-signed for in March 2022. According to the default notice, you haven't made a payment in 8 months. The market shifted, he said weakly. Property values dropped, rental income. The property has been sitting empty because you lied about the zoning permits, I cut him off. You told Grandma Rose it was approved for commercial use. Turns out it's residential only, and you knew that when you bought it. His mouth opened and closed without sound. Then there's the contractor kickbacks. I have copies of the invoices for the roof repairs, $35,000 charged to Grandma Rose for work that actually cost $18,000. Your friend Danny was very chatty when I called him yesterday. Marcus shot to his feet. You had no right to contact my business associates. Actually, I had every right. Grandma Rose hired those contractors. Their loyalty is to her, not to you. I scrolled down on my phone. Speaking of loyalty, Helen, let's talk about your creative accounting with the Meridian portfolio. Helen had gone very still, like a rabbit sensing a predator. $127,000 in stocks liquidated for emergency family expenses, that would be your daughter's wedding. But here's the interesting part, the withdrawal was timed perfectly to avoid the tech stock surge 3 weeks later. If you'd waited, those shares would be worth $340,000 today. I couldn't have known, Helen started. But you did know, Grandma Rose interjected coldly. I specifically told you I wanted to hold those stocks. You insisted they were too risky and needed to be sold immediately. Because I was protecting your interests. No, you were protecting your daughter's wedding budget. I looked up from my phone. The catering deposit was due that same week, wasn't it? Helen's face crumpled, but I wasn't finished. And James, my personal favorite, the Tampa house flip. You used Grandma Rose's credit to secure $85,000 in materials and permits, then discovered asbestos contamination that made the property unsellable. James was shaking his head frantically. That was legitimate. The inspection report. The inspection report that was dated 3 days after you'd already started demolition. I smiled coldly. I called the inspection company too. Turns out they have very detailed records about when you actually contacted them. You can't prove. I can prove you knew about the asbestos before you started the project. I can prove you used Grandma Rose's money to cover up your mistake instead of disclosing it properly. And I can definitely prove that the $85,000 you borrowed has turned into a $150,000 cleanup liability that she's still responsible for. The room had gone completely silent except for Grandma Rose's oxygen concentrator humming in the background. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Marcus, you have 90 days to arrange refinancing for the Jacksonville property and remove Grandma Rose from the loan. If you can't manage that, the property gets sold and you're responsible for any shortfall. That's impossible, he whispered. My credit is shot. No bank will. Then you'd better get creative. Maybe ask your golf buddy David Sanderson for advice. I turned to Helen. You have 6 months to return the $127,000 you borrowed against the portfolio, plus the lost opportunity cost. That brings your total to $213,000. Helen made a choking sound. I don't have that kind of money. Then sell something. I hear the jewelry collection you've been showing off at charity events is quite valuable. And James, I said, saving the best for last, you get to choose. Either arrange for the complete environmental remediation of the Tampa property at your own expense, or sign over your stake in the family business to cover the cleanup costs. James was staring at me like I'd sprouted horns. The family business? You can't touch my shares in the development company. Dad left those to me directly. Actually, Grandma Rose spoke up with obvious satisfaction. Your father left you shares in a company that I own 60% of. As the majority shareholder, I have certain rights regarding the transfer of minority positions. This is insane, Marcus exploded. You're destroying the family over money. No, I said quietly, you destroyed the family when you decided to steal from the woman who raised us. The silence stretched until James finally broke it with a bitter laugh. You know what the real joke is here? He stood up, closing his laptop with deliberate calm. You think you've won something. You think having those papers makes you smart, makes you powerful. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. But you're still the same pathetic little mouse you've always been, he continued, his voice gaining confidence. And mice don't survive long in the real world. James, Grandma Rose warned, but he was already moving toward the door. Enjoy your victory lap, he said over his shoulder. But remember, I know where you work. I know where you live. I know your routine, your friends, your habits. You might want to think about that before you get too comfortable with this power trip. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. My hands started trembling, and I hated myself for the reaction. Are you threatening me? I managed to ask. I'm educating you about consequences, James replied smoothly. Actions have reactions. Decisions have ramifications. Marcus caught on quickly. He's right, you know. Chicago's a big city. Lots of things can go wrong for someone who doesn't understand how business really works. Stop it, Grandma Rose snapped, but her voice sounded weaker now. Helen was nodding along, emboldened by her brother's shift in strategy. Maybe you should reconsider this whole arrangement. For everyone's safety. These kinds of financial disputes can get very complicated. My mouth went dry. Were they actually threatening me? In front of Grandma Rose? The power of attorney suddenly felt like a piece of paper instead of a shield. You can't be serious, I whispered. Dead serious, Marcus said, and the word choice felt intentional. See, the thing about family businesses is that they have long memories. And lots of connections. People who owe favors. People who understand loyalty. James pulled out his phone. Speaking of loyalty, I should probably call cousin Tony in Chicago. Remember Tony, Mom? Dad's nephew who went into, what was it? Private security. I knew exactly who he meant. Tony Castellano, technically family but the kind we didn't talk about at reunions. The kind who'd done prison time for things nobody discussed in polite company. You wouldn't, I breathed. Wouldn't what? Call family to check on family. James's smile was ice cold. Tony's always been very protective of us. Especially when outsiders try to cause problems. My legs felt weak. This wasn't just about money anymore, they were talking about having me hurt. Maybe worse. Plus there's your little accounting firm, Helen added conversationally. Morrison and Associates, right? Small business, only 12 employees. Be a real shame if they lost some major clients due to credibility issues. What credibility issues? I asked, though I was starting to see where this was heading. Well, when word gets out that you're involved in elder abuse, manipulating a sick old woman into signing over her assets. Marcus shrugged. Professional reputation is such a fragile thing. Elder abuse? I turned to Grandma Rose in horror. They can't seriously. But her face had gone ashen, and I realized she was thinking the same thing I was. Who would believe that a sharp, competent businesswoman had willingly signed over control to her youngest granddaughter? Especially when 3 other family members were willing to testify that she'd been confused, manipulated, coerced. 6 months ago, you said she wasn't thinking clearly, James continued, pulling up something on his phone. In fact, I have several text messages where you expressed concern about her mental state. My blood turned to ice. He was right, I had texted him after that birthday party, worried about how tired and confused Grandma Rose had seemed. Texts that could easily be taken out of context. Those texts were about her being upset by your behavior, I protested weakly. Were they? Let's see. I'm worried about Grandma Rose. She seemed really out of it tonight. Maybe someone should talk to her doctor. James read from his screen. Sounds like you were documenting her mental decline to me. The trap was closing around me, and I finally understood how thoroughly I'd been outmaneuvered. The trap was closing around me, and I finally understood how thoroughly I'd been outmaneuvered. You see the problem now, Marcus said, his voice taking on that familiar patronizing tone. You've got a piece of paper, but we've got credibility. History. Witnesses who'll swear Grandma Rose hasn't been herself lately. My mind raced through the implications. They could paint me as a manipulative opportunist who'd taken advantage of a confused elderly woman. The power of attorney that had felt like salvation 5 minutes ago now felt like evidence of exploitation. There's another issue, Helen said, pulling out her own phone. I've been reviewing the family trust documents. The ones Dad set up in 1998. What about them? Grandma Rose asked, though I caught a flicker of uncertainty in her voice. Well, according to Section 12, any major changes to asset management require approval from at least 2/3 of the adult beneficiaries. Helen's smile was triumphant. That would be the 3 of us, plus Mom's vote. I felt the room spinning. What does that mean exactly? It means, James said with obvious satisfaction, that your little power of attorney might not be worth the paper it's printed on. Trust law supersedes individual powers of attorney when there are conflicting interests. That's not true, I protested, but even as I said it, doubt crept in. I was an accountant, not a lawyer. My expertise was in numbers, not legal hierarchies and trust structures. Marcus was already pulling out his phone. Lucky for us, I happen to know a very good attorney who specializes in estate law. Someone who's familiar with our family situation. Don't you dare, Grandma Rose snapped, but her voice lacked its earlier strength. Mom, we're trying to protect you, Helen said, her tone shifting back to false sweetness. From someone who's clearly taking advantage of your illness to manipulate you. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost questioned my own memories. Had I manipulated her? Had I somehow coerced a sick old woman into signing over her life's work? Look at her face, James said, gesturing toward me. She knows she's in over her head. This isn't some small business audit, sweetheart. This is real money, real consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I glanced down reflexively. It was from an unknown number. Heard you're causing problems for the family. That's disappointing. Tony. They'd actually contacted Tony. Problem solved itself, looks like, Marcus observed, clearly having seen my expression change. Family looks out for family. Another text arrived, maybe we should meet for coffee when you get back to Chicago. Discuss your future plans. My hands were shaking now, and I hated that they could see it. Every instinct screamed at me to back down, apologize, find some way to defuse this situation before it escalated beyond repair. You know what? I said, my voice barely steady. Maybe we should take a step back. Clearly there are some legal complexities here that need professional review. The relief on their faces was immediate and obvious. Now you're being sensible, Helen said. We all want what's best for Mom. Of course, I continued, pulling up my own contacts. I think the first call should be to the FBI's Elder Abuse Task Force. They have specialists who deal with exactly these kinds of family financial manipulation cases. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. What did you say? Marcus asked slowly. Well, if we're involving lawyers and making accusations of exploitation, shouldn't we get federal investigators involved too? I mean, we're talking about interstate financial crimes, mail fraud, wire fraud. I met each of their stares. The kind of things that carry federal prison sentences. James's phone slipped from his hands, clattering on the hardwood floor. After all, I continued, my confidence returning with each word, if I'm really manipulating Grandma Rose, then surely you'd want the authorities to investigate thoroughly. Right? The threat of federal investigation hung in the air like a live wire. I watched Marcus, Helen, and James exchange increasingly panicked glances, their carefully constructed manipulation crumbling in real time. You wouldn't dare, Helen whispered, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. Try me. I held up my phone. Agent Sarah Chen is a family friend from college. She'd be very interested to hear about the systematic financial exploitation of an elderly woman by her own children. Marcus stepped forward, his face flushed with rage. You're bluffing. No Fed is going to waste time on a family dispute. Maybe not, I admitted. But they'd definitely be interested in the tax implications of those contractor kickbacks. The IRS takes unreported income very seriously. Especially when it crosses state lines. The color drained from his face as he realized I'd done more homework than any of them had anticipated. And James, I continued, scrolling through my phone, that Tampa property situation. Environmental fraud involving federal cleanup funds is a whole different category of felony. This is insane, James sputtered. You're talking about destroying your own family. I'm talking about protecting it, I shot back. From parasites who've been bleeding Grandma Rose dry for years. That's when Helen played what she clearly thought was her trump card. Mom, she said, turning to Grandma Rose with tears streaming down her face. Please. Don't let her do this to us. We made mistakes, yes, but we're still your children. You're flesh and blood. For a moment, Grandma Rose's expression softened, and I felt a stab of panic. Helen had always been the most manipulative of the 3, and she knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. We can work this out as a family, Helen continued, her voice breaking with perfectly calculated sobs. Without lawyers, without investigators. Just us. The way Dad would have wanted. The mention of Grandpa made Grandma Rose wince, and I watched her resolve waver. This was the woman who'd raised these 3 people, who'd sacrificed and built an empire partly for their benefit. Despite everything, she still loved them. Maybe, Grandma Rose said quietly, we could find a middle ground. Some arrangement that works for everyone. My heart sank as I realized I was about to lose everything. Helen's emotional manipulation was working, exploiting the one weakness in Grandma Rose's armor, her maternal instincts. Of course we can, Mom, Marcus said quickly, sensing the shift. We're family. We forgive each other. That's what families do. James nodded eagerly. And honestly, we've all learned our lesson here. Things will be different going forward. I opened my mouth to protest, but Grandma Rose held up a weak hand. Perhaps, she said, her voice growing smaller, I was too harsh. Too suspicious. Maybe my illness is making me paranoid. The gaslighting was working. After everything, all the evidence, all the documentation, all the proof of their systematic theft, they were managing to make her doubt herself again. That's right, Mom, Helen said gently, taking her hand. You've been under so much stress. It's natural to feel confused. I watched in horror as months of careful planning began to unravel. They were going to win after all, not through legal maneuvering or threats, but through the simple manipulation of a sick woman's love for her children. That's when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Chicago number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. Hello. Is this Rose Castellano's granddaughter? The voice was professional, crisp, and completely unfamiliar. Yes, who is this? Detective Maria Santos, Chicago PD Financial Crimes Division. I believe we need to talk. The phone call cut through the room like a gunshot. Every face turned toward me, and I could see the panic spreading across my relatives' expressions as they tried to process what they'd just heard. Detective Santos. I repeated, making sure everyone could hear. Yes, this is she. I'm calling because we've received some concerning information about potential financial crimes involving elderly exploitation. Your grandmother's name came up in connection with several suspicious transactions we've been investigating. My mind raced. I hadn't actually contacted any law enforcement yet, this call was coming out of nowhere. But the timing was too perfect to waste. What kind of transactions? I asked, watching James go pale. Large cash movements, property transfers, credit applications using an elderly person's information. The kind of patterns that typically indicate exploitation by family members or caregivers. Helen was frantically shaking her head, mouthing, hang up, at me. Marcus looked like he was about to vomit. I see, I said carefully. And what would you need from me? We'd like to schedule an interview. Review financial records, get your perspective on the family situation. These cases can be complex, especially when there are multiple potential perpetrators involved. The word perpetrators hit the room like a bomb. James actually stumbled backward, his face cycling through terror and rage. Of course, I said. I'm actually in Florida right now, but I could meet with you when I return to Chicago. Actually, we may need to expedite this. We have reason to believe evidence might be destroyed if word gets out about our investigation. How soon could you return? I looked around the room at my relatives' horrified faces. Grandma Rose was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I could drive back tonight if necessary, I said. That would be helpful. And Ms. Castellano? Don't discuss this investigation with anyone who might be involved in the financial irregularities. That includes other family members. Understood. We'll be in touch with specific meeting details. And please, bring any documentation you have regarding your grandmother's financial situation. Bank statements, loan documents, property records, anything that might be relevant. After I hung up, the silence in the room was deafening. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. What have you done? I haven't done anything, I said truthfully. But apparently someone else has been keeping track of your activities. James was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. This is impossible. There's no way they could know about. He stopped himself, realizing he was about to confess to something. Know about what, James? I asked sweetly. Nothing. There's nothing to know. But Helen was staring at him with growing suspicion. What were you about to say? What don't they know about? Nothing. James repeated, but his voice cracked. Marcus suddenly grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. You set this up. That call was fake. Some friend of yours pretending to be a cop. Feel free to call the Chicago Police Department and verify Detective Santos exists, I said, pulling free of his grip. Financial Crimes Division. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. The suggestion sent another wave of panic through the room. None of them wanted to voluntarily contact law enforcement. This is insane, Helen said, but she was looking at her brothers with new wariness. What exactly have you two been doing that I don't know about? What have we been doing? Marcus exploded. You're the one who's been playing fast and loose with the investment accounts. That was different. That was family money, not. Not what? I interrupted. Not criminal fraud. Because I'm pretty sure the FBI doesn't make that distinction. Grandma Rose had been silent through this entire exchange, but now she spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been all day. Get out, she said quietly. Mom, Helen started. All of you. Get out of my house. Now. The authority in her voice was unmistakable. Whatever momentary weakness Helen's manipulation had created was gone, replaced by cold fury. I'm tired of listening to you argue about who's stolen what from me. I'm tired of pretending this is normal family dysfunction instead of what it really is. She looked at each of her children in turn. You're thieves. All of you. And now you're going to face the consequences. The silence after Grandma Rose's words was broken by the sound of Marcus's phone buzzing. He glanced at it and his face went even whiter. It's my bank, he said, his voice hollow. They're calling about irregularities in my accounts. Before anyone could respond, Helen's phone rang too. Then James's. The symphony of ringtones felt ominous, like alarm bells warning of approaching disaster. Don't answer those, James said quickly, but Helen was already picking up. Hello. Yes, this is Helen Morrison. Her face crumpled as she listened. What do you mean frozen? On whose authority? I felt a chill run down my spine. I hadn't made any calls about freezing accounts. Detective Santos had been the one to contact me, not the other way around. This was spiraling beyond anything I'd planned or expected. Marcus was frantically declining his call, but it immediately rang again. "They're not going to stop calling," he said, panic creeping into his voice. "Mrs. Morrison," Helen was saying into her phone, "there must be some mistake." "I haven't done anything that would warrant," she stopped abruptly. "Investigation." "What investigation?" Through the phone, I could hear a tinny voice explaining something about suspicious activity reports and federal oversight. Helen's face was cycling through confusion, terror, and something else, a dawning realization that this was bigger than just family drama. "We need a lawyer," James said suddenly. "Right now. Before anyone says anything else." "Since when do you need a lawyer for family discussions?" Grandma Rose asked, though I caught something calculating in her expression that made me wonder how surprised she really was by these developments. "Since the FBI started freezing bank accounts," Marcus snapped, finally answering his phone. "Hello. Yes, this is Marcus Castellano." As he listened, his face went through the same transformation Helen's had. Whatever they were being told was clearly worse than simple account freezes. "Asset forfeiture." Marcus's voice cracked. "You can't just take someone's property without." He was quiet for a long moment. "A judge signed what?" My stomach dropped. Asset forfeiture meant they suspected criminal activity serious enough to warrant seizing property before any trial or conviction. This wasn't just an investigation anymore, it was a federal operation. "Grandma Rose," I said quietly, "did you know this was going to happen?" She met my eyes, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked genuinely frail. I knew something was going to happen. I didn't know it would be this fast. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, James ended his call and turned to face us with wild eyes. "They're seizing the Tampa property. Tonight. They said there's evidence of environmental fraud and money laundering." "Money laundering?" Helen's voice pitched higher. "How is a failed house flip money laundering?" "When you use someone else's credit to hide the source of funds," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "When you inflate costs and kick money back to yourself through shell companies. When you deliberately create clean-up liabilities to justify moving more money around." James stared at me like I'd just spoken in ancient Greek. "How could you possibly know about?" He stopped himself, but it was too late. The admission was written all over his face. "Shell companies." Marcus turned on his brother. "What shell companies?" "James, what the hell have you been doing?" It was supposed to be simple. Buy low, flip high, take a management fee. But the numbers weren't working, and I needed to show profit to keep getting credit, So you what?" Helen demanded. "So I created some invoicing structures to optimize the cash flow," James said desperately. "It's not illegal, it's just creative accounting." I almost laughed at the irony. Here he was, trying to explain financial manipulation to an actual accountant while federal agents were seizing his assets. "James," I said slowly, "tell me you didn't use Grandma Rose's social security number on any of those invoices." The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. "Oh my God," Helen breathed. "You've been committing identity theft. Against our own mother." It wasn't theft. She was going to inherit the profits anyway. I was just streamlining the process. That's when we heard the cars pulling into the driveway. Multiple engines, doors slamming, and voices outside giving crisp professional instructions. Federal agents had arrived. The sound of car doors slamming in the driveway sent a shock of pure adrenaline through my system. Through the bedroom window, I could see black SUVs and unmarked sedans lined up like a federal motorcade. "Nobody move," Marcus hissed, as if we were in some kind of heist movie instead of a suburban bedroom with an oxygen tank humming in the corner. Heavy footsteps echoed on the front porch, followed by authoritative knocking that seemed to shake the entire Victorian house. A voice carried through the walls, professional and unmistakable, "Federal agents. We have a warrant." "Warrant?" Helen's voice cracked. "For what?" Before anyone could answer, Grandma Rose did something that shocked me more than anything else that had happened today. She started laughing. Not the bitter predatory laugh from earlier, but genuine, almost relieved laughter. "Grandma Rose," I whispered urgently, "this isn't funny. There are federal agents downstairs." "Oh, sweetheart," she said, patting my hand with surprising calmness, "you still don't understand what's really happening here." The knocking came again, more insistent this time. James was frantically shoving papers into his laptop bag like he was planning to make a run for it through the back garden. "Don't even think about it," I warned him. "Running from federal agents is a felony." "So is whatever they think we've done," he shot back. Marcus was pacing in tight circles, his phone pressed to his ear. Pick up," he muttered. "Tony, I need you to." He stopped, staring at his screen. He's not answering. "Maybe Tony's busy," I suggested with more confidence than I felt. "Maybe he's having his own conversation with federal agents right about now." The color drained completely from Marcus's face. If Tony was compromised, then whatever network of family connections they'd been counting on was falling apart. Heavy footsteps were now climbing the stairs, accompanied by the crackle of police radios. Helen grabbed Grandma Rose's arm with desperate intensity. "Mom, you have to tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them we were just helping you manage your affairs. Tell them." "Tell them what, Helen?" Grandma Rose's voice cut like ice. "Tell them you weren't stealing from me. Tell them James wasn't using my identity to commit fraud. Tell them Marcus wasn't taking kickbacks from contractors. You can't prove any of that." Marcus exploded, but his protest sounded hollow even to himself. "Actually," Grandma Rose said, reaching into her nightstand drawer again, "I can." She pulled out a small digital recorder, the kind court reporters use for depositions. The red light was blinking, indicating it was still running. "You've been recording us." James stared at the device in horror. "Every conversation for the past 6 months," she confirmed calmly. "Every threat, every admission, every plan to manipulate me into signing over my assets." The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door, followed by a firm knock. "Mrs. Castellano. This is Agent Chen with the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force. We need to speak with you and your family members." Agent Chen. The same name I'd mentioned earlier as my college friend. But I'd made that up, I didn't actually know anyone in the FBI. The coincidence sent ice through my veins. "Come in," Grandma Rose called out, her voice stronger than it had been all day. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 40s wearing a dark suit and a kind of expression that suggested she'd seen every possible variation of family financial crime. Behind her stood two other agents, their presence filling the doorway with quiet authority. "Mrs. Castellano, I'm Agent Chen. We spoke on the phone yesterday." "Yesterday. Not today." They'd been planning this operation before I'd even arrived in Florida. "Agent Chen," Grandma Rose said warmly, as if greeting an old friend. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I believe you'll find everything you need right here in this room." She held up the digital recorder, and I watched my uncles and aunt realize they'd been living in a carefully constructed trap for months. Agent Chen's eyes swept over the assembled family members, taking in their guilty expressions and panicked body language with professional assessment. "We'll need to speak with each of you individually," she said. "But first, I think there are some things Mrs. Castellano would like to explain." The moment Agent Chen's words sank in, I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. Grandma Rose hadn't just been planning to give me power of attorney, she'd been building a federal case against her own children for months. "Mrs. Castellano has been working with us since January," Agent Chen explained, her professional tone making the revelation even more surreal. "She contacted our office when she became aware of the scope of the financial crimes being committed against her." "Financial crimes?" I managed to croak, though I was starting to understand that I'd been as much in the dark as everyone else. "Identity theft, wire fraud, elder financial abuse, money laundering through shell companies," Agent Chen listed methodically. "Your grandmother has been an invaluable cooperating witness." Marcus made a strangled sound. "Mom, you've been working with the FBI. Against your own family." "Against criminals who happen to share my DNA," Grandma Rose corrected coldly. "There's a difference." Agent Chen pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through what looked like extensive documentation. "Mrs. Castellano, if you could confirm the recording equipment was functioning properly during today's conversations." "Perfectly," Grandma Rose said, holding up the small device. "Every admission, every threat, every attempt to coerce me into signing documents." Helen suddenly lurched forward. "This is entrapment. You can't set up your own children." "Actually," Agent Chen replied calmly, "cooperation from victims is standard procedure in elder abuse cases." Mrs. Castellano had every right to document crimes being committed against her. That's when the full scope of my situation hit me like a freight train. I'd walked into the middle of a federal sting operation without knowing it. Everything I'd thought I understood about the power of attorney, about Grandma Rose's planning, about my role in this family drama, it was all part of something much bigger and more dangerous. "Agent Chen," I said carefully, am I in trouble here?" I had no idea about any federal investigation. Her expression softened slightly. "You're not a target of this investigation. But we will need to interview you extensively about your knowledge of the family's financial activities." "She doesn't know anything." James exploded. "She's been in Chicago this whole time. Which is why her testimony will be particularly valuable," Agent Chen replied. Outside perspective, no direct involvement in the day-to-day activities we're investigating. Marcus was staring at his mother with a mixture of betrayal and dawning terror. "How long have you been planning this? How long have you been lying to us?" "I haven't lied about anything," Grandma Rose said firmly. "I just stopped pretending not to notice what you were doing." "Mrs. Morrison," Agent Chen addressed Helen directly, "we'll need you to come with us for questioning about the Meridian financial transactions. The stock liquidations show a pattern of unauthorized access that constitutes felony identity theft." Helen's face went white. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right. Mr. Castellano," she turned to Marcus, "the Jacksonville property situation involves multiple federal violations. We'll need to discuss your relationship with the contractors and the kickback arrangements." "I'm not saying anything without an attorney," Marcus said quickly. "And Mr. Morrison," Agent Chen's attention shifted to James, who looked like he might pass out, "the Tampa property case is particularly complex. Environmental fraud, money laundering, identity theft, we're looking at potential decades in federal prison." James made a choking sound and sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. That's when my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, but this time the message made my blood run cold. "Heard things got complicated. Family meeting tonight. Not optional. Tony was still out there, still making threats, apparently unaware that federal agents were currently in the house. Agent Chen noticed my expression. "Problem?" I held up the phone, showing her the message. "I think someone's about to make this situation much worse." Agent Chen read the message and immediately gestured to one of the agents behind her. "We need backup units positioned around the property. Now." Within minutes, the house was swarming with federal agents. I watched from Grandma Rose's bedroom window as they took strategic positions around the Victorian mansion, turning our family drama into what looked like a scene from a crime thriller. "Tony Castellano has been under surveillance for months," Agent Chen explained as we waited. "Your grandmother's cooperation helped us connect several ongoing investigations." "Surveillance?" Marcus looked genuinely shocked. "For how long?" "Long enough to document his involvement in the financial crimes, the threats against witnesses, and his connections to other criminal enterprises." Agent Chen's radio crackled with updates from the teams outside. "He's actually the reason we moved up our timeline. We couldn't risk witness intimidation escalating to physical harm." Grandma Rose squeezed my hand, and I finally understood the full scope of what she'd been protecting me from. This wasn't just about family money. I'd stumbled into the middle of a federal investigation that stretched far beyond our personal drama. 20 minutes later, Tony's black Escalade pulled into the driveway, right into a carefully laid trap. Through the window, I watched federal agents emerge from concealment like a perfectly choreographed operation. Tony barely made it out of his vehicle before he was surrounded, hands zip-tied behind his back, his expression shifting from arrogant confidence to shocked disbelief. "Target secured," Agent Chen's radio announced. No resistance. The relief I felt was overwhelming. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt safe. Over the next several hours, I watched my uncles and aunt led away in handcuffs, each reading their rights as they shuffled toward federal vehicles. Helen was crying, Marcus was still demanding a lawyer, and James looked catatonic. "What happens now?" I asked Agent Chen as the last of the cars disappeared down the driveway. Lengthy prosecutions, probably plea negotiations, definitely prison time for all of them, she said matter-of-factly. Your grandmother's evidence is overwhelming. I turned to Grandma Rose, who was sitting propped up in her bed, looking more alert than she had all day. Are you really sick, or was that part of the setup too? She smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuinely warm instead of calculating. Oh, I'm definitely sick, sweetheart. Pneumonia is very real. But it also provided perfect cover for getting everyone here at once. So the power of attorney is completely legitimate and has been for months. You really do have full authority over my assets. Her expression grew serious. The question is, what are you going to do with it? I looked around the now quiet bedroom, processing everything that had happened. My family was destroyed, probably forever. But they destroyed themselves through their own greed and criminality. I'd just been the catalyst that brought it all to light. I'm going to take care of you, I said finally. And I'm going to make sure your legacy is protected from anyone who tries to exploit it. Good answer, she said, settling back against her pillows. Though I should warn you, managing this much money is going to be complicated. You'll need better help than a small accounting firm in Chicago. I smiled, feeling genuinely confident for the first time in years. I think I can handle it. After all, I learned from the best. Outside, the Victorian mansion was quiet again, but it felt different now. Clean. Like a storm had passed, leaving clear skies behind. The weak grandchild had finally come home.